Hi, let's talk about persuasion. Aristotle identified three modes of persuasion: ethos, pathos, and logos. Now, this is an overview of everything we're going to talk about in the next few minutes. These three modes of persuasion that Aristotle identified are actually a useful analytic tool. When you understand the relationships here, then you have a way to approach anything that you do when you persuade. Ethos is your audience's impressions of you. Are you experienced, virtuous, and helpful? Pathos is your audience's emotions and engagement, because our emotions modify our judgments. And logos is the clarity and comprehensibility of the argument itself. Okay, now that we've overviewed, let's go into more particulars. Ethos comes from the Greek, as you can tell, which basically means moral character. It sounds like what English word? Ethics. The reader's sense of your ethos is the reader's sense of you. Are you a reputable, truthful source? This affects your argument and how people react to this. Now, this is not just who you are and your reputation before you write, but how you establish yourself in your writing. And if you don't have credibility in a particular area, if you are not an expert in an area, do you talk about what experts say and do, what they believe? Do you cite good sources? As we said, these are based on your personal background and the types of sources you cite. What affects your ethos? What your reader knows about you, your experience, your depiction of yourself, your choices in the text, the types of sources you cite. So ask yourself, what does my reader think of me and my sources? So here are some examples that we're going to go into, but before we address these examples, let's talk about the use of I or me in your text. The best practice rule here is only use I and personal examples when that personal experience provides some special insight into the topic you're discussing. So, if you are thinking to yourself, we're discussing Africa and I was there last month, then yes, bring in that as an example. When I visited Africa in May, this happened. So here are our examples. Let's say you, as the writer, served in both Iraq and Afghanistan as a Marine. You currently suffer from PTSD. You're writing an academic paper, and you want to be persuasive. You might begin your first paragraph by saying, or begin your writing by saying, I served in both Iraq and Afghanistan as a Marine. I currently suffer from PTSD. My experience as a Marine seeking treatment from the Veterans Administration, VA, can shed some light on the current discussion of VA wait times for treatment. Now, this may not be what you end up saying. This may not be everything that your final draft would say, but this is a really good starting place if you want to integrate your own personal experience. Yay! All right. So, you might also begin your paper in a hook with a story about your long wait to get treatment for PTSD. Your personal story tends to interest readers. People love narratives. So after you tell your story, you might then point out that you represent many other soldiers with PTSD. Then you address the data. Yay! Super yay! All right. Let's say you want to write about the same issue, but you have no personal experience with the Veterans Administration. So, as you're thinking about your assignment, you can think to yourself, I have no personal experience with the Veterans Administration, but I found some excellent research showing huge problems with wait times among soldiers. The research was gathered from the VA's own records and corroborated by an independent congressional investigation. So yay, I have done good work. When you present your research, don't use the words I and me. Make statements, make arguments, but leave those words out because you want readers to focus on the facts and issues. Let's say once again, you have no personal experience with the Veterans Administration. Now, you're beginning your paper, and here's the mistake you make. I have no personal experience with the Veterans Administration, but I talk about myself and my opinions all the time. I use I and me throughout my paper. My only sources are a couple of blogs. Do you see the problem here? Yeah, there's a big problem. This person has set him or herself up to fail. Why? Because this isn't how you address issues in an academic environment. Find good evidence and talk about it. And if you have personal experience, wonderful. Talk about that personal experience and its relationship, but always make sure that you use the data. Our second mode of persuasion is pathos. Now, ethos is where you as a person influence your audience. Who you cite, who you talk to, your own reputation, how you conduct yourself in the paper. Just like when you're in person, the way you conduct yourself influences people. Pathos is related to emotion. It's the emotion you invoke in your audience. Now, frequently, poor arguments attempt to invoke a lot of pathos or emotion. They appeal to emotions because emotions modify judgment. So if you make people angry or you make people hurt in some way, you can get them to do certain things. And the more the audience is not inclined to logic, the more susceptible they tend to be to pathos. It's a very powerful tool, invoking emotion in people. It sounds like one English word. The word pathetic, which is related to affecting the emotions or exciting the passions. It's relating to emotion and passion. So here's some impressions of someone addressing pathos. You have the same person who served in both Iraq and Afghanistan as a Marine. He currently or she currently suffers from PTSD. Now here's the person saying, some days I have trouble getting out of bed. At times when I leave my college classroom, the hallway looks like a hallway where I sheltered from gunfire in Tikrit. I need to pronounce that right. If you tell this story at the beginning of your paper, you will incite empathy and emotion in people who read it. They empathize with you. This narrative is powerful. This is a good way to use emotion. Tell a real story that makes people feel something, and then address the facts. So you can use ethos, and you should use ethos, but be careful. Here's another way to use ethos when you are not personally involved. You might begin your paper by saying, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 disappeared on Saturday, March 8, 2014, with 239 passengers and crew aboard. Now this is factual. Your next sentence, can you imagine how the families of these passengers felt in the weeks after the disappearance? That's where you really pull in your audience to an emotional understanding of the issue, and you engage their emotions. Now make sure that that question, which is fairly hypothetical, but you know the answer to, people feel bad, people feel confused and frustrated and angry. When you excite those emotions in your audience, you need to channel them into your argument. Make it relevant. Logos is when you make it relevant. Logos refers to the reason or the rational principle expressed in words and things, argument, or justification. It's reason. It sounds like what English word? Logic. So, if you want to engage logos, which is the most powerful and important mode of persuasion in academia, make sure your primary argument is based on facts. Make sure each part of your argument is tied to the point before. Your reasons need to be logical. You need to have thought carefully about your assumptions. Address those assumptions. So if you are assuming something and basing your entire argument on an assumption, think about the role of that assumption and how important it is. What if that was not the case? What if what you assume is not the case? Don't cherry pick. This means that you don't just look for facts that support your assumptions while ignoring facts that should make you question your assumptions. If you start finding facts that contradict your argument, re-examine your argument. In the end, out of ethos, pathos, and logos, logos is the most critical in academic papers, but each has a very important role. You can't have one without the other. Well, in most, I guess you can, but You probably can't understand the field of rhetoric without understanding all three of these. And logos remains the king. Once again, ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos is your credibility and the borrowed credibility that you get from your sources, from other people. So if you want to talk about warfare and you quote a general, wonderful. You've borrowed some of that general's credibility. If you use an emotional appeal, make sure it's tied to your argument, but know that that can be powerful, particularly if you tell a story. A narrative usually induces an emotional response. Logos is that logical appeal, and that has to be present in every academic paper. So, there's our summary again. Ethos, pathos, and logos. You, your audience's emotions, and the clarity and comprehensibility of your argument. Thank you.